So are we good to go, actually? I guess so. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So, warmly welcome to our panel discussion on companies' role in transformative change and about challenges and opportunities they might face in their way to more sustainable businesses. My name is Mika Nieminen, and I moderate this discussion today with my colleague Matti Pihlajama. The session is organized, yes, wave your hand, Matti, over there. Matti is over there as well. Well, this session is organized by VTT, Technical Research Center of Finland, and Finnish Environment Institute, Syke, and our joint research project on co-designing sustainability-oriented innovation policy in Finland, which is called also KOSU. We have from our team here today Katarina Palomäki. Can you wave also your hand over there? Yeah, thank you. And Hanna Salo. Yes, thank you. And Matti, which I already mentioned, and who is acting my co-host. And Kata and Hanna, they are taking care of the chat questions and comments today. So, and as company quests, we have Chief International Officer Helge van Rossel, was that correctly pronounced? Approximately. And Vice President of Sustainability, Salla Ahonen. Can you also wave a little hand? Thank you. And Head of Sustainability, Sebastian Holmström. They are representing 3 different firms, each having their own approaches to sustainability. And Hertje's firm Buurtzorg is from Netherlands and is well-known reformer of healthcare and management practices. And they are approaching the sustainability questions predominantly from the perspective of social sustainability. Salla is from Neste, which is a big energy company of Finnish origin, and history of being an oil refiner, but with current aim to become a kind of global leader in renewable and circular solutions in fuel and chemical products. And Sebastian is from a Swedish firm called Inrego, which is a major company buying used IT, refurbishing it, and reselling it, and extending the lifetime of electric products, and thus aiming to build a kind of circular economy that way. So, and before starting, some words of the program and panel in general. So we encourage active participation via chat. Kata already welcomed you over there, I think so, yes. And we pick the questions and comments from there to the discussion. Unfortunately, oral questions or comments are not possible here today. Apologies for that. So, and the panel lasts till 17:15 GMT, which is 18:15 Central European time and 19:15 Eastern European time, if there are people from these time zones. So, and we need to stop and wrap up the panel approximately 5-10 minutes before the end time, and that's already approximately that about the program. But we move on to the panel now, which is started actually by my colleague Matti Pihlajama, by giving a short presentation or orienting presentation on the topic. And after that, we have just relaxed discussion with our guests for the rest of the time. So no worries, there's not going to be a death by PowerPoint today or expected, and be active in the chat. So Matti, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mika, and welcome all on my behalf also. And as Mika mentioned, kind of the background for the session is this recently launched research project, which kind of focuses on investigating and developing new approaches for integrating sustainability goals in innovation policy and combining these sustainability and economic targets in different policies. And when it comes to this session, our focus is on company tensions in transformative change. And a few words about that. So as we all know, private sector and companies play a massive role in sustainability transitions. The development of new innovation that shape our different systems of production and systems of consumption, those are to a very large extent driven by companies' actions. And in many countries, companies account for over 70%, even 80% of investments in innovation. And we also know that we have some companies who drive really ambitious change towards sustainable societies, whereas at the same time others do quite little or even actively try to slow down sustainability transitions. So we think it's of utmost importance to understand different kind of companies, what drives their decision making and what drives sustainable business in general. And an important viewpoint to this question is understanding what kind of managerial tensions and challenges companies face. Because in many industries, companies are kind of in the middle of strongly conflicting demands coming from different stakeholders. They need to listen to their owners, the investors, customers, employees, politicians, activists and citizens and so on, who often all have kind of different interests and goals. And it can also be quite challenging to make kind of long-term plans on becoming sustainable, but at the same time you have to always worry about what's going to be the revenue and profit in the next quartile. And in many cases it's really difficult to combine these goals of becoming profitable, economically sound business with different sustainability goals. And we also know, of course, that policymakers can influence companies' actions in many ways. They can set future goals, create economic incentives, build regulatory frameworks, and so on and so on. And we think that to be able to develop effective policies, it's critical to understand what actually drives decision making at companies. And with that purpose in mind, we organize this session, and we see value in engaging in dialogue with experienced people from different companies to understand what are the issues that they face every day, what they think, and create kind of links between companies and the ideas of transformative innovation policies. And we hope that this session is able to generate some ideas for the future.
Thank you, Matti, for excellent orientation to the topic. That is indeed very important topic. And maybe we move on now to the first question. Maybe this is a kind of warm-up question to our guests, and maybe you could a little bit tell us what are the most important or central issues, challenges for your companies in developing sustainable business. Who would like to start? Maybe I can see Herkia is over there. The first one, maybe you could start. Please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Mika. Thank you, Matti, for the introduction. So my name is Gertje van Roesel. I'm from the Netherlands. Background as a nurse, working since decades in home healthcare. And in 2006, we started from scratch on a complete new company called Buurtzorg, meaning neighborhood care. We provide home healthcare, so nurses going out every day, 24 hours, 7 days a week, to the houses of people living in the neighborhood, taking care of whatever is needed. And we started from scratch on because there was a big frustration in the Netherlands amongst care professionals. We've seen a lot of changes in policies during the decades after the 90s. and both care professionals as well as our patients got very frustrated. So we tried first, each of us, to make a change and to stick to our vision of providing good quality of care within our existing organizations. But in 2006, the decision was made to start from scratch on a complete new company. So that's what we did. And of course, there were challenges because we were doing something completely new within the existing field of home healthcare in the Netherlands. So the challenge at that moment was not the care professionals, it was not our patients, because everyone understood what we were doing, which was very simple, just providing good quality of care for our people in the neighborhood. The challenge at that moment, and still nowadays sometimes, is the external world. Because the external world was not used to what we were doing, which was keeping it small, keeping it simple. And of course, we were aligned to the Dutch law and legislation, but for our frontline staff, we made it simple. And which was also very revolutionary, we worked without management. So nowadays we have 10,000 care professionals working in small teams with a maximum of 12. And there's a lot of autonomy for our teams and for the individual professionals. Trust is the starting point. Finding local solutions for our teams instead of bothering them with overall big company solution or policies. I think that's what's really highly valued and which is highly rated by our staff. So without having the first purpose of working on social sustainability, of course, that's what we're doing. Because hey, if you see what an impact this has on the well-being of our staff, and at the same time, services for our patients, it has an enormous impact.
Thank you. Very interesting. What I would say a kind of human-based or human-driven approach to running a company. Totally, I would say. Maybe Salla, you would like to continue.
Sure. Thank
from
you.
Your perspective.
So I'm Salla Ahonen, heading sustainability at Neste, and it's actually quite funny. I could recognize a lot of the things that the previous speaker was also saying. Like you introduced, Neste was founded as a local oil refining company with the purpose of securing Finland's oil supply. Now we have a new purpose for the company, which is creating a healthier planet for our children. And I think that already says a lot about the change in the company. But part of that has been, or actually most of it is based on innovation done in-house in the company. So renewable solutions that we are providing, so renewable aviation fuel, renewable diesel, and then polymers and chemicals based on renewable raw materials as well. So when we introduced the renewable diesel, it was a product that didn't exist. So you had to get regulatory approvals before you could actually start selling it. And a lot of people confuse biodiesel with renewable diesel. No, this is a completely different product. So trying to make people understand that we're introducing something new, but something that is exactly the same product as something, based on fossils, but now it's based on renewables. So making people understand, bringing in something else where the policy system wasn't designed for it. And I think this is quite often the case when you are bringing a new innovation, then the business environment doesn't really know how to handle that. And I think this has been always really, really fun to work with. So I've been working with sustainability issues for more than 25 years, but also quite often from the policy perspective. So I'm a sustainability nerd turned lobbyist, coming back to being a sustainability nerd. And I think there's been a massive transformation also in how policymakers look at sustainability. And I think this is a transformation that still needs to happen. And we need to move beyond, command and control and restrict into also how do we find the carrot in addition to the stick. So what are the things that encourage front runners? Can we have maybe, I don't know, lower taxes or mandates for more sustainable content or all kinds of possibilities? But before I take the whole hour and a half, I think I'll hand over to Sebastian for now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, please, Sebastian, go ahead.
Thank you for that introduction. And I think there are a lot of good points that we've touched upon. And I think, Matti, you touched upon one of the, I think, real cores of it, getting profitability and sustainability aligned with each other to make sustainability scalable. I think that's one of the biggest challenges in making the circular economy happen. And my name is Sebastian Holmström, and I work at Inrego as the sustainability manager. And we are the Nordics' leading IT refurbisher. And we work globally with around 90 countries. And what we do is buying used equipment. So when you're done with the laptop that you're sitting at right now, we buy that, we pay for that. We take it to one of our facilities, either in Stockholm, Sweden, or in Finland, where we upgrade them. We make sure that they are good as new, and we resell them with warranty again. So we're trying to prolong the lifetime of electronics, and we have been doing this since 1995. So it's been a while now, and last year we reused around 350,000 products. And I really believe that getting the profitability and sustainability aligned is one of the keys here. And electronics is a good example because it's a product that has a high value, and in high value products, which are easy to transport, it's easier to get these business models moving. But we're seeing so many businesses trying these business models right now, but they're just not getting it because the cost of acquiring the product, putting it on the market again, is more than what they get paid for it. And of course, that's not a scalable solution. And it's really interesting to be here talking about policies and how we can make that happen.
Okay, thank you. Excellent. Would you like to, Matti, ask something?
Yeah, sure. I could continue with this kind of balancing this profitability and sustainability, because we of course, as Sebastian said, it's important to make scalable, profitable business that is sustainable. Then we also know that the world is in many ways moving really fast, and when we evaluate ideas and new ways to develop the business, the world might be in 5 years a different place that it's now. So I'm thinking that could you shed some ideas on how do you make the decisions, for example, for new ideas, new projects, how you kind of put weights on the business case and the sustainability aspect, how you make sure that is it possible in your company, for example, reject some highly profitable projects if you're not sustainable enough, or how do you acknowledge the world is changing? How do you take that into account? Salla.
Yeah, I think this is the whole company is based on, well, I quite often say that we sell sustainability, because when you sell renewable products or renewable solutions or circular solutions, nobody's interested unless you can prove the sustainability of the solution. And I think it's really, really important that you also try to make it clear what is the sustainability problem that you're trying to solve with your solution, and then be able to prove that. And for us, it's quite often about the raw materials. We use mainly waste and residues. And I think it's interesting also what Sebastian was saying, kind of you're using waste and residues as well. And for us, people quite often then ask, so why is your product so expensive? You probably don't have to pay for the waste and residues. Yes, you do. And this would open a whole new discussion into, circular economy, and how if some people see that if you pay for it, it's no longer a waste. And I think that's a big contradiction to the whole creation of circular economy, but let's not go into that. So what we do, we have a lot of systems in place in ensuring that the sustainability of the raw materials, looking at their impact on biodiversity, looking at their impact on the human rights in the supply chain, looking at what is the greenhouse gas savings that we can bring with these kinds of raw materials. But then also we do try to understand what is the change in the market. So how is the business environment changing? What are the customer demands going to look like? But then also, if you said that balancing cost or or sustainability, I think a good example would be, because we have the climate commitment, so we're aiming at carbon neutral production by 2035. And a lot of people were saying that you're insane, how can you do that? But we actually then looked at all the different possibilities that we could do. And we have about 100 different initiatives that we can do in our operations to make that happen. And then when we had a couple of workshops, when I was collecting ideas from all of the organization, and I asked them, so if we know, why haven't we done this already? And people would say that it's because the investment criteria are not supportive of making these changes. So I said, well, let's change the investment criteria. And that's what we did. So now in the company investment criteria, you need to show its impact on greenhouse gas emissions. So is it helping to reduce our own greenhouse gas emissions, or is it helping to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of our customers? So, bringing them a solution. Additionally, we added an internal price on carbon, because we firmly believe that polluting will cost more in the future. So what we have introduced in the calculations is this higher cost that we anticipate will happen. So it makes sense for us to start making those investments into different ways to reduce the emissions, even if it's not yet true today. And this has been really, really important. And luckily, or funnily, we've seen a big change also in how the price of carbon is going up in the world as well. I don't know if anybody else is following, for example, the EU ETS. It was around 20 euros about 2 years ago. Now it's around 80 euros. And I think this is a fundamental change and very much needed if we want to see these kinds of changes happening in the companies. So I think it's really understanding how much sustainability is already affecting the choices of not just consumers, but different companies, and building that into your system so that you can really build a business case into providing one of these solutions. Why are you so quiet?
Well, I can join on there.
Somewhere for a while. I wasn't quite sure whether I dropped out, actually. Sorry. Please.
I think you made a really great point of changing the criteria for decisions, and that's something that really needs to be done. And how do we evaluate different kinds of projects? And the future will look different than what the past have done. And those who are developing the solutions of the past and not circular solutions will not be the winners. So you really need to look on how can we develop new circular solutions and finding ways. And for us, that's really how can we prolong the lifetime of electronics for as long as possible. Maybe we don't even have to buy the product the first time. We can help the first user repair their product and then get it 2 years later. Or if we're selling a product, how can we help them to repair their product? And we're going to set a new environmental goal this month that we're going to try to get back 100% of all the products that we sell in the Nordic market to us, so we can reuse it a third time, so we can create free loops for the same products. So I think it's really all about creating new models, but you have to find the models that there's also a demand for them, and create a demand for that, and make circular solutions that cost less, that's as easy as the linear solutions, and that's as safe to use.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, and I think to be clear, we are not a for-profit company. We're a foundation. We're providing home health care, but still, I recognize a lot. Like you said, Sala, the decision-making process is very important. And at Buurtzorg, at our company, we are very well aware of it. And our primary process, which is the care of our clients, is always leading in the decision-making process. And that might sound sort of obvious, but in our experience, that's not obvious at all. And often in healthcare in the Netherlands, there was and still is new innovations coming up, new projects, where actually it's not clear what needs to be solved. So our starting point always is also what actually needs to be solved. And if it doesn't make any sense, and if the frontline staff, our care professionals, don't think it's necessary or it will not fit into their daily work, we will not do it. We will not make that decision. So the care professionals are really in the lead, and the decision making is with them. We support them. And I think and like you said, Sebastian, the world is changing. And I think what is really great in our company is that as we are working with small teams, we have a back office which is supporting all these teams, but every team is like an autonomous team, and they are very flexible and they are very well able to adapt to new situations. And I hope we will get to that later on, because COVID, I think, is a great example to see, okay, actually, how is a company able to deal with those new situations, with new contexts, with crisis? And yeah, thank God we have seen that even in a company where there are almost 1,000 self-organized teams, it works. It works. They feel okay. They feel supported, and they feel strong.
Yes.
Thank you. Interesting. Please go ahead, Matti. You would like to continue.
Sure. Yes. Thank you. I was going to follow with the kind of really simple question that what do you think are the kind of is the most critical bottleneck or challenge at this moment that kind of for growing and scaling your ideas and becoming even more sustainable in a bigger scale? What prevents that currently?
Yeah, I can just add there quickly. And when you look about the bottlenecks of pre-used electronics, most people automatically think that the challenge is the selling of used equipment. That's not a challenge at all for us. The challenge is the getting hold of used equipment. And we pay good for that, but either way, it's tricky to get into these linear economies, changing the behaviors for us IT managers, because they've always worked in a certain way. They know what will happen if they send the used electronics to recycling. It will be gone. They don't have to think about it. And there's also challenges there with, for example, that an IT product will be written off. After 3 years, it doesn't exist in their books. It's gone. And the IT manager does not have the responsibility for retaining the value of that product, nor does an economic manager has the responsibility for that. So it's really a product that doesn't really exist at all. And to get somebody to care about that product is a challenge. I think we're getting to a point in which people are doing that, and they're seeing that there's money in that. But it's still a hassle to do that and to change behaviors from the way we've worked in the linear economy for a really long time.
Yeah, so a truly systemic problem. What about Salla? Yeah.
Would you like to continue? Sorry, please go ahead.
So if I think the systemic challenges are there for everybody. If I think about, again, for example, the climate commitments, we are dependent on having the infrastructure in place. So having enough renewable electricity. I mean, we're all saying that we're going to replace this and that by electrifying it, and then it needs to be renewable electricity. But if you look at all the companies, all the sectors being electrified, do we have that available? And this is why we have, for example, made some power purchase agreements for new renewable electricity to make that available also. But similar challenges exist for many different issues as well. We're also, building collection systems for the waste and residues. And I can fully sympathize with Sebastian, having spent a lot of my life working with, electronics, and knowing that, when it's about people, they tend to hold on to their electronics. So it's difficult to get them recycled and refurbished when people just keep them at homes. So it's also about changing the mind shift and making these kinds of changes happen. But for us also, maybe one big challenge is also credibility. I mean, we have been an oil company, we still have the fossil side of the business. So getting people to see that we're actually doing this change, we're actually making things differently, we're actually measuring the outcome of all those changes that we're making, and explaining these to policymakers, to customers, to NGOs, and with carrying all the load of companies that have said that they're doing and maybe haven't followed through. So it's very difficult to be that one to really show that we are actually changing things.
It's funny to hear, Sala, because we're a complete different business. Our service is completely different, but we're facing the same challenges, which is the external stakeholders. And constantly, as we are doing something different in the Netherlands, stakeholders are looking at us from the start in 2006, but still nowadays, and wanting to interfere or to argue. And so it's constantly getting into the dialogue where we think it needs to be our initiative, because otherwise nothing might happen. So constantly having this dialogue, asking for a period of time in which we can showcase that if we organize it different, or if we do it different, results might be better, for example, with less costs. But it's an ongoing effort that every day we need to work on it and try to get understanding from the external stakeholders, and not to step away from our principles. Because like with incidents, or with the COVID crisis, or with whatever might happen, the risk of stepping away from our principles, or not keeping it small and simple and throwing in all kind of policies, which often is much easier than keeping those policies away from the front line. That's an ongoing challenge.
That's very interesting, actually, what you are saying, and what I'm hearing over here. That actually, as many times it is said that okay, it's the customer demand which can change kind of firm behavior in this sense as well. But you are saying something, not totally, but almost totally different. That you want to make the change, and that the customers aren't the kind of hard thing over here. It's very interesting, I think so. What do you think? What would be the role of the public policy over here? For instance, providing incentives, whether, for instance, in the case of Sebastian, that kind of regulation demanding the circulation, or something like that. For instance, of course, there are different ways to do that, but I can imagine that also public policies might have a role over here, providing incentives to pushing also the customer demand more to that direction as well. You would like to see it, or am I totally wrong over here?
Yeah, well, I think public policy, of course, plays a really important role. And today we're in the unfortunate situation where every policy is made for the linear economy. We have perfected the linear economy during the last 100 years. Just how can we extract resources, put them on the market, and throw them away as soon as possible? That's really what our policy is made for today. So we really need to shift all of that to how can we keep the products in use for as long as possible. And it's a problem there with the cost relationship between new and used. If you look at electronics, it's easy to get the economics going for example, laptops, smartphones, screens. But if you take a keyboard, for example, if you take this keyboard, it's just to actually clean the keyboard and make sure that it works, cost more than taking out new raw materials from all over the world, send those materials to Asia, make a new product, and send that product to Sweden. So how can that cost more than labor? And I think that's a key problem that we have. Resources are really, really cheap, while labor is really, really expensive. And of course, that's the way the linear economy has worked, but that's not really the way that the circular economy will work. So we really need to rethink those relationships between each other and tackle these systematic problems to keep the products in use for as long as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Others, would you like to? What is your view on this question? Yeah, Salla. The role of public policies and
yeah, as you might have understood from my story already, is that still public policies are a hinder for what we are doing. Mm-hmm. And we see quite some improvement, and we are more and more into conversation and not into a fight with the public policymakers. Mm-hmm. But still, it's difficult because it's still what we are doing. Yeah, still for quite a lot strange, threatening, and So as we are trying to keep it small and simple, and trying to keep a lot of policies and regulations away from the daily work of our frontline staff, it's still very demanding for our people in the back office, because there is still a lot of regulations, there's still a lot of policies. Mm-hmm. The role, for example, of our CEO is an ongoing investing in this relationship with the stakeholders, with the public policies makers, to get an understanding of what we are doing, and to use the information of the care professionals. I think what is really lacking a lot in the Netherlands, at least, is that the policymakers are not from the healthcare. They are not nurses. They don't know what they are talking about. So often they come up with new policies that are not solving what is really needed in the front line, and which is not solving problems from our patients.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Salla.
If I say a few things, I mean, it's not maybe so much that, people wouldn't want the solutions, but that they are expensive. So is there a way of bridging that gap in the price? Well, yes, I think there need to be some policy tools there as well. And I think there are some, for example, for the renewable content, there may be, mandates that you need to have a certain amount of renewable content in products, or in already exists for fuels, now being introduced for aviation fuels as well. So these kinds of tools obviously can help in scaling it up, because we need to have, enough demand to justify for more production that may help bringing down the costs as well. So this is clear. I was also, I stopped to think a little bit about also then this, how to bring new innovation to the markets, and this is always difficult. The policymakers obviously are facing a difficult situation. How do you regulate for something that doesn't exist yet, and also so that you're not stopping something good from happening, but also not allowing anything at all from happening. Sometimes you need to re-look and rethink some of the existing policies, and I think a good example, for example, we also have the chemical recycling of plastics. So we're trying to turn old plastics that cannot be mechanically recycled into new plastics, that are as high quality, same grade as virgin plastics, but completely recycled. But this is now being debated if chemical recycling should be seen as recycling or if it's not recycling. And I've been trying to explain that we're not competing with mechanical recycling. Please recycle mechanically everything that you can, but then there is still the stuff that you cannot. Or if you want to have medical grade plastics, you cannot do that with mechanical recycling because it's not going to be meeting with the grades and everything. So also having an open mind in maybe revisiting, and then here I come to the point that I mentioned in our pre-discussion, that sometimes the waste hierarchy might not be the best possible solution if we're really trying to see what happens with different waste fractions. So really looking at some existing tools from the point of view of how can we actually move to a more circular or lower climate impact economy. So it's not an easy task. And sometimes it's I keep saying that we also need to look at the big picture and not focus on just pushing for one solution, because we might need plenty. But then also you need to look at the details. So I'm not envying the policymakers either. But yeah.
Definitely, it's a complex systemic challenge. Please,
Yeah, I just want to add there, and as you said, there's a big challenge for policymakers right now, and it's really tough to do all of this, and there's a challenge right there that we have to right now have one foot in the linear economy and to scale up the circular solutions into the economy to show that it's possible for policymakers also to make those decisions, because there's a lot of more policymakers listening to us right now when we're reusing 350,000 products every year than it was just a few years ago when it was a lot less. And to really show that it's possible to do these things. And there's possible to do so much more in today's system. And then, of course, we need to tweak things for the future's circular economy. And also, even when policymakers want to make it right, and I think you made a really great point there before with the policymakers not always knowing exactly what they're legislating, and that they need that knowledge. For example, at Inrego, we have had two really big threats to our existence as a company. Both of those were policymaker decisions. The first one was in around 2000 when the Swedish government, well, actually, they lowered the price of new products because they wanted more people to get access to technology. That's good, but they only lowered the price for new products, which meant new and used was basically the same. They didn't even think about that the reuse industry existed. And the second time our existence was threatened was actually around 5 years ago. It's a Swedish tax on chemicals. And it says in the tax that reused products are not supposed to be taxed. But they still are to a big extent because they don't understand how we work. They think, for example, that we buy the products from Neste's office in Sweden, if you have one, and we resell them to another actor in Sweden. But Neste might work with a big retailer. And if we buy that electronics from the retailer and resell it in Sweden, it will be a tax on chemicals on that. So they didn't really understand how we worked. So even when they tried to have an exemption for reused products, they didn't succeed. And one of the problems here is also how slow the policy is. So it was made 5 years ago, and it was a mistake. And pretty much all the Swedish parties agree on that, but we still haven't seen any change. So it's a challenge there. And it's really, the only solution is that this question is too small of them to care about, because tax on chemicals on all electronics is a big question. But on reused products, it's still a small industry. But as long as we got these hinders, it will be other countries that will get ahead of us. And there's a lot of jobs that will be created in the circular economy of remanufacturing the coming decade. And I think the policymakers who's smart right here, they will have a great job increase in their country. So there's a lot at stake and a lot to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Now I would like to ask whether Kata or Hanna have any questions from the chat or comments on this so far.
Yeah, we actually have several comments and support for the viewpoints that it's difficult to balance the economic and profitability aspects together with sustainability. and that the natural resources are too cheap at the moment to support circular economy solutions. And one specific comment was targeted for Sebastian in the chat about profitability and sustainability and the difficulties. But the example of Inrego shows that there's something that we can all learn from your business model for sustainability. And one might then ask, what are the lessons that the panelists have learned, and if there's any tips that you could give us.
Any comments?
Yeah, there's a lot of good things there. Well, I can start with one of the questions, which I see here as well, and that's the trickiness of selling sustainability to customers. And I think that's a really, really tricky thing. There was another comment showing that, well, we've been around since 1995, and there's something to learn about how we get this sustainability and the economics going. And I think we are in a fortunate position because the products we sell is about 40% less than new products. So we're really out competing new on price, and therefore we're having we don't have to do the convincing on the environmental, and a lot of actors buy from us. They don't even care about the environment, but they do it because they get a lot of money by doing that. And there's a challenge with a few other solutions, and I guess that's for Neste, for example, with the fuel that you're having that have a bit higher price. And I think that we're using your fuel as a fossil-free solutions for our customers, but then they pay a bit more as well because it costs more. And we have some companies who they care so much about the environment, and if they get paid a little bit less for the electronics, that's completely fine. And for some companies in which they don't really, it doesn't work. But we're really trying to move all of them towards a fossil-free option and nudging them doing that, because it's really not that big of a difference.
Yeah, I would say that, selling sustainability depends on who your customers are. So quite often when we have a completely new solution, like selling sustainable aviation fuel for corporate customers so that they can use it for their business flights, which we now do, you need to find the customer that has already made their own sustainability commitments. So, then we're helping to solve a problem that they have identified themselves. And then it's about how much are they willing to pay for it. Yes, our solutions are often more pricey at the moment than the fossil ones. But if it's also helping them to lower their scope 1, 2, or 3 emissions, then they will see a benefit than when talking to their own stakeholders, sometimes also in paying for the pollution, which I believe will start costing more in the future, not just for us, but also for the potential customers. But really, I think after all these years that I've been in this sphere, I really think that the perceptions are changing. And I think people do generally care more about having those sustainable solutions. They are, years ago already when asked, people would say, yes, I would pay more for a sustainable solution, but actually they didn't. But now I think we have seen a big change, and I think this is something that should also be taken into account. So don't be afraid if you think that you have the most fantastic sustainable business solution, but it's going to cost a little more money. All you need to do is be able to prove the benefit. So for example, for us, when we say that with our products you can lower your greenhouse gas emissions, then we need to make sure that we're not over-promising. So this is why we have externals that are verifying our calculations so that we can show them this is the benefit that you get. So having a credible offer, I think, is really important. And I think this is why there is so much work being done at the moment as well, developing different standards for measuring or reporting so that people would understand and they would be able to, compare credibly different kinds of solutions. Finding the right customer when you're building a new business, I think, is important, so that you have somebody to pilot that with, and then where do you scale it up, and then talk to the policymakers if that is needed. So how do you make sure that you can show the benefit? And now if we think about, for example, innovation policy. If you look at Horizon, for example, it's tied into the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think sustainability is getting into different parts of policy making slowly but surely. So I think there's never been a better time to bring in a new, more sustainable solution, because I think everybody is looking for those. So there's more open ears than there were when I was younger.
Nice. Yeah. I think, and keep in mind, and it's, with our company, I'm talking more on the social sustainability, that one of the questions I heard was, okay, lessons learned. I think for us now, as we are operating 15 years, our lesson learned is the focus on the work-life balance. And I prefer to call it more the life balance of our staff, because I think definitely for the young generation, they're not talking that much anymore about work-life. It's their life in which they are having their social components, their work, their everything is in a combination. And we've seen in our company that working in those small teams, autonomous teams, is highly valued. But one of the risks there, or what we see also in surveys constantly, is that as people feel so responsible for what they are doing, and of course, keep in mind, it's working with patients, with clients, which is always very demanding, that our staff always points out that their life balance is in threat. So since quite some years, we come up with vitality programs in which what do we try to solve is this issue, keeping them healthy, the well-being of our staff, focusing on, okay, what do they want, what do they need? And I think for myself, it's almost like a change, because often we say the patient is in the center for us as a company. And sometimes I think, no, actually, it's our staff. It's our people working in our company. They are in the center, and they are our clients. And all we need to do is support them and ask them constantly, okay, what do you need? So I think that was our lesson learned, to focus on the life balance of our staff.
Thank you. Interesting. Would you like to continue, Matti, from here?
Yeah, I think there was kind of just been good discussion on the role of policy, and I think all of you have in common that you talk about the kind of challenges with the regulation, and this kind of brings to my mind the idea. There's now been a lot of talk about how regulation should be innovation friendly, so that it kind of leaves space for and encourages for new solutions, but at the same time kind of trying to ensure safe conditions. And another thing that you've been all kind of mentioning is that policymakers should have a kind of deeper understanding of different business contexts, and especially when the business environments are moving very rapidly. There's, I think, lots of kind of, it's good to identify these areas where the policy has room for improvements. How about the other way around? Do you identify some policies that have supported you in becoming more sustainable in the past or currently that has positive effect on you?
If I go first, I mean, climate policies are fabulous. I mean, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to solve the world's climate problem. So I'm very supportive of anything. Having a global price on carbon would be fantastic, but global regulation is very difficult. Having the mandates or having circular or renewable content in new products, I think these are all extremely helpful. And like I said before, I mean, having both, restricting, bad things from happening and then helping scale up good solutions are all really, really good. I'm really liking, I already mentioned Horizon, for example, but also, looking at, funding available for new kinds of solutions. And now that they are tied into solving the big sustainability challenges, I think this is really good. And I really am very happy about a lot of these changes that are happening. I think that, that the point that, policymakers don't have enough information, well, I think we should look in the mirror as well. So I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we provide them with enough facts and information in a way that is, credible and understandable, and keep bringing that knowledge, because otherwise, I mean, no policymaker can be an expert in all areas. And when you're really bringing into the discussion something that's completely new, you can't expect people to understand it. So really having these multi-stakeholder discussions on new upcoming policies and regulations, I think is really important. And now this is the lobbyist in me. I used to participate in these European innovation partnerships where the EU would bring together businesses, NGOs, different stakeholders. I thought that was really extremely useful. I'm not sure how many good changes in legislation finally came out of it, but it definitely helped deepen the understanding on how many different actors you need to understand, and how these different things link to each other. And I remember, I'm not sure if it was the partnership on smart cities and communities or the one on raw materials, where I came up with this idea that we should have like regulation-free zones where you can actually develop new concepts. And it was really funny. The Commission officials looked at me and said, the most innovative ideas always come from the Nordics. But I still haven't really seen the innovation-free zones. But I think there is a lot that has been done already. So I really don't want to have us complaining. And I think that we all should take the responsibility also in bringing in more information to the discussions.
I can join on there, and I agree that sometimes there's too much complaining about how the policy could do this or that, and that we should sometimes look ourselves more in the mirror and see, are we doing ourselves everything possible in our hands to really drive the circular economy forward? I know within our business, there's a lot more that we can do right now before we see any new policy. We're going to welcome new policy that's going towards that direction, but there's so much more that we can do already today. But with that said, I'm still going to complain a little bit. And the question was if we have seen any policies that really have helped. And during our 25 years, we haven't really seen any policy in the direction that helps our business. We have seen two that was threatening to our existence, but we have really, the more we have been away from policy decisions, the better for us. But hopefully there's going to be more and more better decisions going on. And I like the idea of the zone where we don't have any regulations. And what I really think is that we need to try things. I mean, I recognize that it's really, really difficult to legislate for a circular economy because it hasn't been done. So we will make a lot of mistakes, but we will need to learn how to fail fast, make our bad decisions, learn from them, and redo. And I think that's really important to take right now, because we don't have time into delaying these transitions towards a circular economy. We need to do it now. We need to try legislations. Some might not be perfect, but we need to then either take away them or adjust them to make sure that we can scale them. And another point I think is that too many legislations is just in the silos. We're touching important topics, but it's too small of questions. We need to look at the systematic changes. Just one example in Sweden is that they reduced the value-added taxes for repair. But that's only for when a private consumer goes to a repair shop and goes back. It doesn't if the private consumer sells the product to an actor like us, who will repair it and then resell it. And actors like us is a lot bigger trend than people going to repair their own things. So I think there's so much going on, but it's in silos. And we need to try things, we need to fail, and we need to adjust them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in addition there, I think, and of course, we also do complain a lot about policies and But we've seen for the last year some policies where we think, okay, this is really going into a helpful direction. For example, more on active citizenship, which also relate to community healthcare, where, of course, it's not only the professional providing the service, but where we try to involve the whole informal network. And this is more and more supported by policies. Then what we see definitely in the Netherlands is that more and more national policies are now moved towards more local policies, which also is very helpful, because you can imagine that for the services and for the needs of patients living in a rural area, their needs and their demands are different than when you live in Amsterdam or in a big city. So then it's very helpful that we are not hindered by national policies, but that we have the sort of space to work with our local policymakers. And what we see also more and more in the Netherlands is that policies are not filled in completely detailed into every little detail, but it's more like an umbrella, a framework in which leaves freedom for the professionals to come up with their own solutions, with their own way of working. And of course, within the framework, so there are boundaries, but this as well has been very helpful. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That is very interesting what you're actually saying. What I'm hearing over here now, this is also something that what has been discussed in policy circles for a long time now. So need a kind of horizontal policy making, and we should get rid of this policy making silos and get a kind of comprehensive view, coordinated view of policy making as well. So and still we are struggling with that. I mean, this discussion has been going on for a long time as well, and we are still having it. So there is still things to do. Very interesting to hear that also from your side as well. So I still would like to come back to this kind of what would I say, kind of engagement point of view as well. That what I hear also here, that you all are kind of emphasizing the need of more dialogue between policymakers, companies, and customers or citizens as well. And there should be also kind of platforms for kind of sharing the ideas and creating kind of shared views as well. Am I right over here as well, or how do you see this thing, and how could we kind of promote that kind of dialogue concretely? Do you have ideas about that as well? Any suggestions for concrete? We could move on concretely.
Yeah, I think for us, we wouldn't have been able to survive or to scale up like we did without the dialogue. It's an ongoing dialogue that very often it's on our initiative that it starts, and we constantly need and want to put energy in it. And when you talk about platforms or creating platforms, for example, how we look at the ecosystems of where we are operating and where we are providing our services, like those small teams working in small neighborhoods, we do realize it's not just about the care that we are providing. It's about the whole ecosystem, about the whole environment in which our patients, our clients are working, living, socializing. So what our frontline staff always tries to do is to create those local platforms to involve all kind of people working, living in that small neighborhood to improve the life of our citizens. And of course, our focus is the healthcare, but we constantly work on the environment and the ecosystem So it's about education, everything is involved there.
Yeah, I wish I would have, the perfect answer here. I think there's a lot being done on this already. I mean, there are all these stakeholder consultations and stakeholder fora and all that. And I think these are really valuable. And like I said, we also need to make sure that we as businesses are really making sure that our voices are heard. Sometimes also, how do we communicate in a way that is clear and transparent and credible enough? Do we understand when and where to bring what kind of information? If we're talking about EU policy, I think there's a lot being done already in trying to break the silos. Circular economy bringing together million different parts of legislation, really also trying to work between different parts of the Commission in making sure that they are not contradicting or too badly overlapping. And then we complain that it's too vague and it's too fluffy and it doesn't go into detail. But I think there is a lot to be said about, keeping in mind the big picture, really the end goal. Are we trying to, develop the circular economy? Or when talking about the climate package, are we really making sure that we're looking at all the solutions that we need to scale up to reach that end goal, and then try to keep that in mind even when we're looking at the more detailed regulation. And here, I don't know if I should say it, but I'll say it anyways. And it was in the video that has now been shared, that somehow looking at how to make emissions go down in the transport sector, the only solution seems to be electric vehicles. And I think that's a fabulous solution. And I fully applaud it. And I hope that scales up really quickly. At the same time, if we want to reach our climate targets, we need to also look at all the other solutions as well. And we need to keep in mind the timeline. So how quickly can we do what with what kind of solutions? So instead of waiting for the perfect solution that might happen in 2050, we don't have that time to wait. So I would, in a way, even as a policymaker, I would do a roadmap. And this is how we design, for example, our climate program for Neste. So what can we do right now and start implementing those right now? Look at what could be done but needs more development. Start making sure that you put that effort into developing those solutions. And this is kind of what's happening now when there's more emphasis being put, for example, on how can we scale up green hydrogen, for example. And then who should we be making sure that are working with whom to make sure that we start scaling up the solutions that we can, and by when does that need to happen, or by when can we make that happen, so that we would have a more realistic understanding on what are the gaps in the plan, and then decide what are the tools that are needed for that particular gap. Do we need to put more money into building infrastructure for renewable electricity? Do we need to put more money into innovation, programs for, basic research, or for further research on something else? Or do we need to start restricting certain types of products from entering the market? Or should we be putting more effort into trying to scale up the novel solutions? And I think that would help in trying to have both the big perspective and understanding that, sometimes solutions take time to build and scale up.
Good point there, that we cannot put all our eggs in one basket. There's so many solutions out there. It would be great if we could drive fully electric cars to get our electronics back from our customers. But the only fossil-free solutions that's possible for the scale that we're working today is HVO 100, and to really finding these solutions that are working now and using them, and having this bigger picture in the future, which might look different than what the solution will be today to bring down the emissions. I also, of course, that we should make our voices heard to the politicians, policymakers, But there's also a challenge there that when the linear economy has so much more money for public affairs than circular companies, and how to do this in a smart way. How can we actually get our voices heard with both the budget we have and with to get the solutions out there. And right now in Sweden we are getting together a bunch of reuse actors across every field to really get our voices heard together. Because when you go as one company to a policymaker and say that you want this, they will think that, of course, you want this for the benefit of your company only. But when we go there as a group of reuse actors, from textiles to electronics to people working business to business, business to consumer, consumer to consumer, and what we really want to do is keep products in use and having solutions for that. And I think that's been a successful point for us, and to bring this forward as a group of companies and not only one company with one agenda that of course will benefit themselves. And then I really like to have the big picture, that where are we aiming for and how we'll get there. And I actually think Netherlands is really good on that in their circular economy goals, and both having a long-term circular economy goal that we want to have circular economy in place, but also to for example, that to 2030 that you want to halve the use of virgin resources. I think that's a bold statement to show every company in which direction you are going. Just imagine if you should use 50% less resources for electronics. What will you do? Will you use 50% less? Probably not. You'd probably use it for longer. You'd repair it. You'd sell it to somebody else. And I really like that, using 50% less virgin resources, and what does that mean for every business? And to actually think about that, and I think that starts a lot of creativity with, at least within my mind, on how can we deliver products and services in a better way in the future.
Great. I think we have some questions in the chat.
Yes, we do. Actually, quite many questions, and we've had a lively discussion in chat. So one of the questions concerns how to balance social and environmental sustainability, and whether, another question here, how have you used tools such as the OECD due diligence guidance to aim for the sustainability and help you in that?
Does somebody want to start? Okay, I'll go.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the OECD guidance is fab. Really, really good to have these kinds of things. And this used to be in my previous life something that I would tell the policymakers as well, that, make use of these kinds of efforts that have already been done, and this has also been taken in good use, for example, when deciding the conflict minerals regulation for Europe. So that's good practice. I think that was a lot of work to actually come up with that guidance for OECD. So good to see that utilized also by policymakers. For us, it's not this balancing social and environment sustainability. No, it's not. Both are needed. We've had cases where we've had suppliers who have good performance on environmental side, but then they are not meeting our criteria on the social side. So we put them on hold until they have improved on their practices. I think this is something that is fundamentally important, that we don't overlook any aspect of sustainability. I think this is one of the big changes that we've seen in the past decade. It's no longer just about environment. It's also about caring about, human rights, caring about, decent living conditions, living wages, all of these things. So I don't think you can compromise.
Anyone else want to say something on that?
Well, I can just add briefly there that, of course, social sustainability is really important, and it's easy to just dig deep into environmental and forget about the social sustainability. And of course, we need an economical, environmental, and social sustainable business in which you want to scale. And if we actually backtrack to 1995, why we started, it was not because of environmental sustainability. It wasn't too hot of a subject back then. And I think the circular economy, that name even, an Element Foundation, 2012. So we actually were founded just on the basis of social sustainability, providing electronics to more. Back in 1995, not so many people could afford electronics. They were really big, they were really expensive, and what we tried to do was finding a less expensive way for people, and especially back then students, to get access to electronics. I think it's important having both of these in mind at the same time. And another thing that I can add there, because we have a production facility, two of them, with circular production, and our inflow, if you look at the linear economy, the inflow into a production is pretty much the same all the time. You can apply it up and down, but it doesn't differ that much. But in the circular economy, how much products we get in 1 month to another can differ a lot. And looking on social sustainability and the work balance at production really differs. And that's a challenge between the linear and the circular economy, because we will not know perfectly how many products we will get in each month. And we can't have employees for covering that every month. So we need to find a balance, because we cannot have 30% too much employees those months we have too little. So really finding that balance of having this, and the solution, I'm not quite sure to, but we take in people when we have short term, when we have too much, and trying to find ways to do this. But I can guess in the future, when we're going to have more and more circular companies, there will be more and more different peaks around different times. So how can we use each other's labor resources when it's less to do at one production facility at another? And I haven't thought done in this question already, but there's a challenge that we don't have as much in the linear economy, that I think we will see more and more as we'll have more and more circular production companies coming up.
That's a really interesting problem. Well, I have one question about the kind of recent years. We've been living through the COVID pandemic, and some are really afraid that these pressing health needs are kind of making us ignore the many other sustainability issues. Then on the other hand, others are more optimistic that this kind of now we have seen how drastic changes we can achieve as a society, that maybe we can do kind of benefit from these learnings when tackling other sustainability challenges in the future. So what has been your experience? How has the pandemic affected your organization's sustainability efforts?
Yes, well, you can imagine that it had an enormous impact on our company and, of course, the whole world. And what was interesting to see that from the start of the COVID crisis, which was March, April 2020, it was in the Netherlands or in Europe. Talking about policies, we noticed that the government was mostly focusing or aiming at scarcity. If we talk about protecting our staff in the front line with materials, with testing and whatever. So there, quite immediate, we took the decision to not be aligned to the national policies, and we said we make our own regulations or rules for protecting our staff, to make sure that they feel protected and that they are safe, which was not highly valued or appreciated by the rest of the people in the Netherlands or the other organizations and the government, because they said you need to follow the national rules. But we said no, we're there for our staff and we are there to protect them. So immediately we set up an airlift for material like masks and all the protection materials. We set up our own testing facilities, and we were explaining in the media what we were doing. Because this ongoing, it's almost related to the dialogue, ongoing, making out in the open, explaining who we are and what we are doing, and mostly why we are doing this, which is, of course, for our staff and for our clients. And what we noticed, and I'm sure this is similar in most of the countries, is this polarization which is going on in a society here in the Netherlands, which has an enormous impact as well on our teams. We haven't got the solution there yet. And we do realize we need to support them. We need to be there with them. We need to stay close to them and keep the conversation going. But it's an enormous challenge, to be honest, to deal every day with the COVID situation. But what we were happy to see to finish is that as we are working with self-managed teams, we noticed that from day one that there was this COVID crisis, the teams were so proactive and not waiting for the boss or the policymakers to tell them what to do. They started to act and they started to be prepared of the unknown. And we did some research, not only in the Netherlands, but also in other countries where we do have partners, where we noticed that working like with self-managed autonomous teams allowed the staff to feel in this big crisis more at ease, more in control than working in a hierarchical organizations.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that, unfortunately, I'm looking at the clock at the moment and our time is about to end. So it's time to start to wrap up, I think. So this discussion, thank you for very rich and detailed discussion on the issue. I have really enjoyed this discussion. Thank you very much. Now I should say that I'm again facing an impossible task of trying to summarize this. Well, I'm trying to put it into some catchwords maybe, which I was trying to pick up from the discussion over here, and then you can also, of course, complement what I'm saying over here. So what I was hearing, for instance, these are just kind of some highlights, which would I say, I'm not trying to put everything together, is that besides the customer demand, a public policy is needed. It's very important as well. But there is also need for a kind of increasing engagement of companies and customers and citizens into policy making as well, in order to increase the understanding of the immediate needs of companies and the environment and about the complexities of the environment where the companies are also operating. So and the contextuality is one of those issues also which needs to be understood as well. Companies are in different positions and they have different business operational business environments over there. So there can't be no kind of one size fits all policy in that sense. And this also, so it requires a kind of policy mixes. It requires horizontal approach to policy making, because this is a huge systemic challenge as well. So, and I think what I was also hearing, I wanted to ask from you at some point, but what I was hearing that there are different levels where we could work as well. So there is this grassroots level actually you are emphasizing, but of course there is a lot of kind of, for instance, engagement mechanisms already on the macro level, so to speak, over there. But we need also to find ways how to maybe to develop this kind of engagement mechanism on the grassroots level, on the firm level as well. I think so. That's what I was hearing over there. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But and a kind of balanced view. And finally, and maybe this is not the least one, is that we need a balanced view on sustainability, definitely, so that there is a balanced view between the social and environmental aspects, which has been emphasized during the last few years. And of course, the economy is over there, and business is coming if you are kind of paying enough attention to the sustainability aspects as well. So this was I was trying to put together in the over here what I was hearing. Maybe you would like to add something still, Matti, or
Yeah, sure. I think that's a good summary, and there are kind of many themes that remind me of our discussions on transformative innovation policies. There's policy mixes, as you say, contextuality. Then there was discussion about kind of experimental spaces for trying out new innovations and kind of niches that may then be scaled up. There was mention about kind of reflexivity in fast-moving environment. Just you have to kind of maintain an up-to-date understanding of different solutions and their potential and policy needs and different business context. And then there was also discussion about setting kind of concrete, measurable policy targets. For example, for circular economy, that reminds is very close to the discussions on mission-oriented policies.
Thank you, Matti. Very good additions, and very good to have these bridges between also kind of policy making and also this analytical language we are using usually, and also what we are talking about over here. And actually what I hear also, we are talking very much about the same issues, using just a little bit different language maybe, or different words for the same phenomenon. Kata or Hanna, would you like to add something over here?
Well, I could add there in the comment box, there were also comments, kind of green light for this, adding more dialogue between companies and different stakeholders. And there was 2 comments on the how companies should be more involved with academic and research institutes. How do you see this? How would this help you in your sustainability goals?
I think that's absolutely necessary. We actually collaborate with universities, research institutes a lot. I quite often say that for us, sustainability equals innovation plus partnerships. I'm an engineer, so I need to make a formula. But I think innovation really plays a key role. You don't have all the understanding and knowledge in your own company, so I would really welcome that. And in my past, I've actually been talking to universities, hoping that they would also take more action into working with companies. We quite often then, see that, research is done, but then nobody takes it forward. And I think we need to strengthen that link between, universities and companies to really take benefit of all that.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Maybe still we have now 1 minute left, and I will give you all you participants, thank you very much already from my part, but still, if you have some sort of message, 1 sentence to policymakers or other firms, what they should do, just compress it into 1 sentence or 2 sentences. Would you like to, what kind of message you would like to send there?
I can start. Just we need to act now. We need to fail many times, and we need to adjust and learn from what we do.
And remember the big
Thank you. Very
picture.
good.
What is the problem we're trying to solve?
Very good.
Yeah, and take responsibility, learn from each other, and thank you for setting up this conversation, because I think this is also what is needed, to exchange and to listen to each other.
That was very well said. That's exactly what I agree definitely with that we need more this kind of setting of dialogue between different persons involved in this issue as well. So, but I think it's time to stop. It's 19:15 over here in Finland, Eastern European time, and I thank you, everybody participated over here. I thank you, all those people listening to us. Unfortunately, we can't see you, but thank you for participating actively also via the chat and all the questions and comments in this panel session. Hopefully, this was also useful and fruitful for you all. Thank you on my behalf. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.